The First Night in London. Chapter 1. The Suitcase. The shuttle service I booked was 23 minutes late. 23 minutes. Long enough for a woman standing alone at Heathrow Airport at 10 o'clock at night to start feeling lost among a sea of strangers. I stood there, clutching my handbag tight under my arm, my eyes fixed on my phone screen about to die from a low battery. The flight from Manchester had lasted only 45 minutes. But the anxiety before my first day of work in London exhausted me more than any long-haul flight ever could. My suitcase. Black. Hard shell, matte finish, silver zippers. Stood upright beside me. Anonymously boring luggage. Just like thousands of other suitcases rolling across the gleaming floor of this terminal. Mitchell Cole hated airports. He hated the overly bright lights, hated the noisy crowds, hated the feeling of having to wait around without being able to do anything else. But the job didn't give him a choice. He stood by the information desk, phone to his ear pretending to listen, his eyes never leaving the black suitcase left sitting awkwardly in the middle of the walkway. Victor, his stupid but loyal cousin, stood a few meters away, wearing a cap pulled low, hands shoved in his pockets. Have they called yet? Victor approached, whispering, Not yet. Mitchell frowned. The buyer should have arrived 15 minutes ago. He didn't like this. Every minute of waiting was a minute of risk. Then he saw the girl. She was young, blonde hair falling over her shoulders, dressed simply. A provincial girl coming to London looking for work, he guessed. She was standing next to a black suitcase, identical to his. She checked her watch, checked her phone, looked around with an impatient expression. Outside the terminal, Claire Weatherby had just managed to step into a black taxi. She breathed a sigh of relief at finally escaping that chaotic airport. Hammersmith, 27 Blythe Street, she told the driver. Her voice tired. The car pulled away. Claire leaned her head back against the seat, closing her eyes. The city of London flashed past the window, like an endless ribbon of light. She thought about her new apartment, her new job, the new life that would begin tomorrow. She had no idea that behind her, a few cars back, a dark grey car with no license plates had been silently following all along. Chapter 2. The Chase. The apartment I'd rented was on the 3rd floor of an old building in Hammersmith. The living room window looked out onto a small street lined with trees, their lush foliage obscuring the streetlights, creating dappled patches of darkness on the sidewalk. I opened the suitcase at 11:23. I would never forget that moment. The click of the zipper, the feeling of the hard shell separating. And then, not my clothes. Not the Agatha Christie novel I brought to read along the way. Not the jar of lavender-scented cream my mother had insisted on stuffing into my luggage. Instead, there were clear plastic packages, stacked on top of each other like bricks. White. Very white. The kind of white powder I'd only ever seen in movies and news reports about drug busts. And beneath those white bricks were stacks of money, tightly wrapped with tape, the blue-grey colour of £50 notes, arranged in neat, even piles. I stepped back. My back hit the wall. Cold, I couldn't breathe. I just stood there, my eyes fixed on the suitcase, and the suitcase fixed on me like a dark, staring eye looking straight into my soul, mocking my innocence. Suddenly, as if sensing something, I crept to the window, gently pulling back the curtain just a crack. Down below, under a tree across the street, there were 2 men. One wore a dark overcoat, looking straight up at my window. The other wore a cap pulled low, hands in his pockets, leaning against a dark grey car with no license plates. They didn't move. They just watched. And I knew in that moment that they knew I was here. They knew I had the suitcase, and they wouldn't leave until they got it back. I had to do something to escape this. Mitchell Cole stood under the tree, looking up at the third-floor window. The curtain moved slightly. He smiled. Victor stood by the car, his hand still in his pocket, gripping the handle of a knife. Now what? Wait! How long? Mitchell turned to look at Victor. His gaze was icy. As long as it takes. Until she comes out. Or until we go in. Victor swallowed. He didn't like waiting. But he hated Mitchell's rage even more. They waited. 15 minutes. 30 minutes. An hour. The lights in the apartment had gone out long ago. But Mitchell knew the girl wasn't sleeping. He could sense the fear radiating from those walls, like a scent only a predator could detect. Then, from the end of the alley beside the building, a figure darted out quickly. Mitchell squinted. Blonde hair. A backpack over her shoulder. She was running. The back exit, Mitchell said, his voice still calm. Get in the car. I ran. I didn't know where I was running to. I just knew I couldn't stay in that apartment another minute. I didn't dare open the suitcase again. I didn't dare touch it. I left it there, in the middle of the living room, like a deadly curse. I dashed through the back alley, past stinking trash cans, my feet stepping into puddles of black water. Reaching the end of the alley, I didn't dare look back. I just kept running. The night market was still open. Food stalls blazed bright in the cold night, the smells of grease and spices mingling together. I plunged into the crowd of strolling people, weaving past mothers pushing strollers, past couples walking hand in hand, past children playing with balloons. I didn't dare stop. I just kept running. When I finally caught my breath, I was on a double-decker bus. I didn't remember how I'd gotten on. I huddled in the back seat, my face pressed against the cold glass, looking out, and I saw him. The man in the cap. He was standing in the middle of the road, spinning around, looking in the direction the bus had just disappeared. I'd escaped this time. Or so I thought. I was wrong. Mitchell Cole slapped the steering wheel. You let her get away? I didn't know she could run that fast. Victor argued, his voice rising. She was like a rabbit. You tried chasing her. Mitchell silently stared at his cousin. After a long moment he said, Number 94 bus. Heading towards the center. She'd get off somewhere around Holborn. Mitchell started the engine. The dark grey car sped off into the night, gliding past rows of yellowish streetlights. It only took him 15 minutes to find the girl. He drove slowly down each street, his eyes scanning every figure on the sidewalk, every cafe still lit up. And he saw her. In a small cafe on a street corner. She was huddled in a corner, her face buried in her hands. The cafe window was steamy, but he could still clearly see that blonde hair. He pulled the car over to the curb, turned off the engine. Park at the end of the street, he told Victor. Block that way. This time, don't let her get away. I didn't know how long I'd been sitting in that cafe. My cup of tea had gone cold long ago. I called my best friend, but she didn't pick up. I called my mother, then hung up mid-ring. I couldn't drag her into this. When I stepped out of the cafe, the night was fully dark. The yellowish streetlights cast patchy light onto the damp sidewalk, still wet from the afternoon rain. The air was biting cold, seeping into my bones. And I saw it. The dark grey car parked blatantly at the end of the street, under a streetlight that had long since burned out. The man in the overcoat was leaning against it. He wasn't smiling anymore. He was just looking at me. The look of a hunter watching its trapped prey. I turned around. The man in the cap was blocking the entrance to the small alley behind me, his hands still in his pockets, shoulders slightly hunched, ready to pounce at any moment. This time I couldn't run. Chapter 3. The Final Prey. They moved closer. I stood in the middle of the sidewalk, both ends of the street blocked, my back cold with sweat. Not a single person passed by. Not a single car. The whole street seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what was about to happen. The man in the overcoat spoke first. He walked slowly, step by step, as if savoring the moment. "Sweetheart." His voice was terrifyingly soft, sweet as sugar, but cold as ice. "The stuff me and my boys had in that suitcase. You picked it up by mistake. We're not mad. These things happen, right? Who would have guessed?" He stopped about 3 meters from me, close enough for me to clearly see the small scars on his face, his cold grey eyes, and the smile that never reached those eyes. "But now, let's go somewhere else to talk, okay? Quieter, more private." He reached out his hand. A large hand with rough fingers gripping my arm tightly. His nails were slightly yellow, probably from cigarettes. I struggled. "I don't have it. I left it in the apartment. Let me go back and get it for you." "I don't know anything. I swear to God, I just opened the suitcase and saw." The man in the cap, Victor, let out a laugh. A dry, cold laugh echoing in the empty street. He approached from behind, right up next to me. "You think we're stupid?" he said, his thick North London accent raspy. "Let you go back and call the cops. Then we come here and you just point us out to the guys in uniform to come pick us up." He grabbed my other arm. The two of them held me tight between them, the smell of cheap cologne mixed with sweat and cigarette smoke stinging my nose, making my eyes water. They started dragging me towards the grey car. I saw the car. The back door was already open, like a dark mouth waiting to swallow me. I knew, if I got into that car, I would never come out again. They would take me somewhere, some desolate place, an abandoned industrial estate, an empty lot by the Thames. And I would just be a name on a missing persons list, a few lines in the local news. "Young woman mysteriously disappears, police investigating." I screamed. I screamed with all my remaining strength, a scream that tore through the quiet night, hopeless and desperate, echoing off the rows of closed-up houses. "Help me! Help!" The man in the cap's hand clamped over my mouth. The smell of sweat on his palm made me want to vomit. The man in the overcoat grabbed my hair tightly, yanking my head back. "Shut up, you bitch," he hissed in my ear, his hot breath on my cheek. "You want to die faster." The man in the cap's hand reached for the car door handle. He pulled it open. The heavy door swung wide. He pushed me forward, towards that pitch-black interior. Then, in the moment my hand touched the edge of the car door, just as I was about to be shoved inside, flashing blue and red lights exploded from the end of the street. Deafening sirens tore through the still air, a sound so violent and powerful I thought my eardrums would burst. 2 police cars hurtled towards us at terrifying speed, tires screeching on the wet road, spraying water everywhere. They skidded to a halt less than 3 meters from us, blocking the street. Doors flew open. Men in bulletproof vests stormed out like a whirlwind, handguns aimed directly at us, flashlights illuminating the faces of the men holding me. Police. "Get down! Get down now!" The man in the overcoat. "Mitchell, let go of me." He turned, trying to run. A large officer lunged at him like an arrow, tackling him to the wet ground. His knees slammed into the concrete with a sickening thud. A pained groan escaped his throat. But a moment later he was flipped onto his back, his hands cuffed behind him, shiny handcuffs snapping shut around his wrists. The man in the cap, Victor, was still clutching me, as if I were his last shield. I felt his hand tremble. He was panicking. But just a second later, 2 officers from behind tackled him. His face slammed against the hood of the car. His cheek pressed flat against the cold metal. I staggered, my knees giving way as I sank onto the sidewalk. My legs couldn't hold me up anymore. I trembled violently like a last leaf in a winter wind. The air was thick with the acrid smell of burnt rubber from the sudden braking, the smell of sweat, the smell of fear. A young female officer ran over, kneeling beside me. Her face was beautiful, stern, but with a warmth in her hazel eyes. She placed her hand on my shoulder, gently, as if afraid I would shatter double quotes Miss Weatherby. Miss Claire Weatherby. Her voice was soft, in complete contrast to the chaos that had just occurred. Are you okay? Look at me. You're safe now. No one can hurt you anymore. I'm Sarah, police officer. I'm here with you. I couldn't speak. I could only cry. Tears and snot mingled, salty on my lips. I hugged her tightly, like a child hugging their mother after a nightmare. She patted my back, saying nothing, just letting me cry. A man stepped forward. He wore a brown leather jacket, no bulletproof vest, and had a shiny badge on his chest. His face was weathered, his eyes sharp as knives, but when they looked at me, they softened. He stood there, hands in his pockets, looking at me with an expression I couldn't name. Perhaps guilt, perhaps sympathy. Detective Daniel Croft. Drug Squad, he said, his voice deep and strangely calm, as if he were reporting the weather. I'm sorry you were frightened, but we couldn't intervene sooner. We needed them to show themselves. Caught in the act. I looked at him, dazed. The tears still flowed, but I tried to hold them back. You knew from the start. Detective Croft nodded. Not quickly, not slowly, just a confirming nod. That suitcase had a tracking device, he said. We've been following this gang for 3 months. Mitchell Cole and Victor Stone, 2 high-profile drug dealers in northeast London. When you picked up the wrong suitcase at the airport, we saw everything. We've been following you ever since. To the apartment in Hammersmith, through the night market, onto the bus, down this street. He paused, looking at me intently. We were always nearby, Miss Weatherby. All through those hours. When you were running, when you were scared. When you were sitting alone in that cafe. We were always there. Waiting for the right moment. I shivered. A shiver not from the cold. They had been there. All through those terrifying hours, when I was running in desperation. When I thought I was completely alone in this strange city, they had been there, watching, waiting. I had never been as alone as I thought. The 2 drug dealers were dragged into the cars. Mitchell Cole, the man in the overcoat, turned back to look at me one last time as he was pushed inside. His eyes were still cold, but now tinged with something else. Helplessness, hatred, and maybe a hint of surprise. He hadn't expected to be caught like this. He hadn't expected the small prey that seemed so easy to swallow to be the trap. The police car door slammed shut, swallowing them into darkness. The engine roared and the car pulled away, taking the 2 men who had just tried to take my life into the past. The young officer, Sarah, helped me to my feet. My legs were weak, but she was steady. Come on, she said gently. Let's take you to the station. Get your statement. Then you can go home. Home, I almost laughed. I never had a home in London. I had only been here a few hours and I'd almost died. The end.